What is up, Go Nation? That car guy Eddie here. Thank you very much for tuning into today's channel. Today we're actually going to talk a little bit about something a little different. We're actually going to talk about, is the 2021 Camaro going to be the last Camaro built by GM? And I have a unique perspective on this because I was around and I was into cars the last time that GM did this, and I'm seeing a lot of the same things. So let's just get right into it. So right off the bat, I want to tell you guys that it came out the other day in news that GM said that they are no longer in development of any Camaro past the year 2021, which means there will be no 7th gen Camaro. And as of yet, okay, now they haven't made it official saying, you know, we're discontinuing it or anything like that, but what they've done is they focused all of their resources into making the new Corvette, everything into the new Corvette. And the thing is that the Corvette might just be what kills the Camaro, and I'll explain what I think about that here in a few minutes. But yeah, so that's the news. So if you're a muscle car person and you're like, go team Chevy, I love the bow tie, you know, I love the Camaro and everything, what it represents and stuff, you might be out for, you might not be able to get one pretty soon, or you'll have to focus on a used one. So let's reverse time a little bit, okay? Let's go back to the year 2000, 98, 99, 2000. Eddie was in high school. I was rocking a 1980 Chevy truck at the time. It was not fast, but it was orange and it was cool, and it had tuck and roll velvet interior. I was like, odale, ese. It was so cool. Like, that truck was so cool. But I remember specifically, I used to go to this bowling alley all the time, and there was a guy there who had a red 2000 Camaro, and no, it was orange, and it had, maybe it was a 01, it had checkered racing stripes on it, and it was a convertible, and the license plate said the last of a dying breed, and I was like, that's cool, because I knew that the Camaro was going away. And the reason the Camaro went away in the early 2000s is because the horsepower wars, I mean, you got to remember, after the original muscle car era in the 70s, in the early 60s and mid 70s, you started having the gasoline crisis. And then after the gasoline crisis killed muscle cars, or tried to kill muscle cars, you had the smog laws, which tried to kill muscle cars. I mean, if you look at a 1985 IROC Z, you know, it's probably got 180 horsepower out of like a Tuneport 350 350 Chevy small block. The Fox bodies weren't all that better. You know, you're talking 200 horsepower out of a 5-liter fuel injected motor. I mean, you're not talking, these cars weren't fast, and the big reason why is mainly because of smog. So what they had to do was they had to lighten the vehicles. That's where the Fox body came in. That's why the Fox body is so popular, is because, you know, if you lighten a vehicle, you don't have to have as much power because of power to weight ratio. That's the reason the Civic is so fun to drive. But the real problem with this is that in the 90s, you started having major safety constraints come out and restrictions where you had to have side impact bars, you had to have better bumpers, you had to have airbags, cars had to survive rollover tests and side impact tests, and all this stuff added weight to the cars. Now, from a car enthusiast standpoint, that is cool, right? It's like, oh, cool, like I'm safe in a car. But from someone like us, well, we're like, man, we want a car that goes fast, especially a muscle car. That's a huge downfall. You don't want that. You don't want weight, you know? And it's one of those things where that tried to kill the muscle cars as well. But through the 90s, you know, you had some weird refresh. The Mustang came out with the S95, the real round body one in the early 90s, a successor to the 5.0 Mustang, to the Fox body. And the first 2 years that Mustang came out, 94, 95, Mustang was so broke, Ford was so broke, they put so much money into designing that ugly 94, 95 body that they couldn't even afford to design a new motor. So because of that, the 94, 95 Mustangs have the same basic high output 5 liter that the Mustang had in it since 78. I mean, that's a long time for that tired motor to be running out. Over time, Mustang, what they did is they changed to the 4.6 liter overhead valve cam, and a lot of people like that motor. You know, they did. When it came out, it actually got Car and Driver's Motor of the Year award. I know when you think about it now, you're like, oh, wow, that motor's not that good. But at the time, that motor was revolutionary. You know, people wanted something that could rev a little bit more free, and that's kind of what they got. Well, Chevy went the other way. What I mean by that is, you know, in the 90s, they kept their small block V8, a push rod motor, and they basically used the adage, there's no replacement for displacement. And they basically said, we're going to keep the 5.7 in our car, which is the Chevy 350. Okay, so for cubic inch guys, 5.7 is a 350 and vice versa. Anyways, so they said, hey, look, you know, we're going to go ahead and keep our push rod. And because of that, they were able to keep a lot of that low-end grunt, that low-end torque that you're used to with V8s, okay? It's one of those things where that's what people want. They want the low-end, they want the grunt. And the car, the F-body Camaro of the 90s, was only like 200 or more pounds dry than the Mustang. So really, you're talking about, you have a Mustang that may have, you know, 230 horsepower maybe, but then, or no, I think it was 260 was that one. Yeah, it was 260 horsepower was the 4.6 liter. But then Camaro, I mean, their 5.7 was making almost 300 horsepower. So you got a lot more for the Camaro, a lot more bang for the buck for the Camaro in terms of straight line speed. Now, flash forward to the late 90s. The cars needed a refresh really, really badly. And, you know, GM was in a weird place in the late 2000s. GM was spread really thin. What I mean by that is you had Chevy, you had Cadillac, you have Buick, you have Pontiac, and Chevy was, let's say GM was to the point where they had their hands kind of dipped everywhere. They had Saturn, you know, and I personally think that money was too thin everywhere in the 2000s, and they had to start cutting a lineup. Now, what else happened in the late 2000s? Well, the Camaro came out, and the Camaro, that year Camaro, the late 90s Camaro, I think it was the C5, last one with the pop-up headlights, maybe it was the C4. I don't know, I'm not a Corvette guy. But the C5 or C4 came out, no, definitely C5. C5 came out, and the C5 was priced competitively with the Camaro. So you could go to a dealer lot and you could either buy a Camaro, like a 2SS Camaro, or you could buy a Corvette. And what was happening was people were buying the Corvette and they weren't buying the Camaro. And slowly but surely, the SUV craze started to happen. People wanted bigger cars. Gas got really cheap. And, you know, GM didn't want to invest any more money into their old, tired F-body cars. And when that happened, GM decided, along with killing the Trans Am and the Firebird, they decided to kill the Camaro. And the last year Camaro was in 2002. And it was like, wow, R.I.P. Camaro. But you know what? At the time, that was okay because nobody was excited for it anymore. You know, it was old. It was something that was boring. Just, you know, nobody really talked about, ooh, the next year Camaro's coming out, because guess what? It was the same thing it's been forever, you know? There was nothing exciting about it. Now, in 2008, I think 2008 came out, that is when Transformers came out, and there was the big hype. They did the huge redesign, right? And I need to tell you guys, the redesign for the Camaro was freaking awesome. It was. It had a great motor in it. It had phenomenal looks. It looked like a 60s Camaro. You know, they did a spot-on job with it. But you got to remember what Mustang was doing. Mustang was reclassifying their car, and they were designing a new one. And in 2005, Ford actually got to the production first, and they released their version of the S195, and theirs looked retro. Do you guys remember the big retro craze in the early 2000s? Maybe, you may not. You might just be too young. But when that car came out, when that Mustang came out, that was a big flipping deal. It was a huge deal. And it got people excited for muscle cars. And more importantly, it flared the retro vibe. That's what I want to tell you here. It flared what was exciting about people's nostalgia. And sometimes nostalgia sells. So Camaro hooked up with the Transformer team. And of course, you have Bumblebee. And Bumblebee did a couple of things. He became a pop culture icon. It became an awesome movie car, and it was a great car. So Chevy sold the living snot out of Camaros for a long time just because of that movie. And it's funny because if you look at the evolution of the Camaro since 2008, all it's done is gotten smaller. All they've done is basically try to put the thing on a diet to make it faster. Yeah, they've stuffed bigger motors in it, but they've made it smaller. They've lessened the back seat, and they've become so reliant on lap times and proving how fast the car is and how much better the car is than the Camaro or than the Mustang. Chevy has put a lot of money into telling you that it's a better car than the Mustang, and I will tell you that for a long time it was. Dollar for dollar, pound for pound, it was a better car than the Mustang. That was right until the 5-liter Coyote came out. And Ford doesn't have a car above the Mustang that us normal people can get. They don't. So what does Ford do? They take it, they dump a bunch of money into the R&D of the Mustang, and Chevy can't do that because Chevy is too worried about dumping money into the Corvette. And that's a more important world for them. Because here's the thing. When you buy a Camaro, it's one of those things where you buy a Camaro and you're like, yeah, I got a Camaro. Every single person wants to know when you're going to upgrade to the Corvette. Everybody. Because that's just it. The Camaro's a stepping stone for the Corvette. Whereas with a Mustang, it's the top of the lineup. I mean, I guess you can go GT 500 or something like that. But, I mean, in realistic expectations, nobody's going to get that. You know, anybody that buys a Mustang is not going to go buy a GT 500 as their next car. But many people will buy a Camaro, especially the older group of guys, drive for a little bit and then end up going and buying a Corvette. They really will. And I've actually talked to dealers a little bit about that and some sales guys about that. And that's how you get low mile Camaros in there all the time. You get these high spec'd up Camaros that are awesome, beautiful machines that somebody basically just came and took a loss on. I gotta roll the window up or it's gonna get crazy. Man, it's hot in here. Well, what I think about the new Camaros and about GM basically saying, hey, look, we're gonna turn down our production of this. My feeling behind it is that the new C7 mid-engine Corvette, they have said that they're only going to price it, the base model, at $50,000. That is cheap. 50 grand for a mid-engine Corvette? I paid freaking 42 grand for an all-wheel drive Ford Fusion. Like, I think, and that is what Ford has to worry about. Ford now has to worry about this mid-engine Corvette coming and stomping the living daylights out of the Mustang. And what does the Mustang have that the Corvette doesn't? Well, it's got back seats. The problem is, if Mustang's not careful, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to keep making the car smaller, trying to make it better, and they're going to turn into what happened with the Camaro. They're going to get so locked on lap times and stuff that they're going to make the car not comfortable, hard to view out of, things like that. Because that's what happened with the Camaro. So, what do I see going forward in the future? And where do I see this going? Well, I do think that they're going to discontinue the Camaro because of the simple idea of the price thing. So here's the deal. So if a Camaro is 44 grand and a Corvette is 50 grand, what are you going to buy? And don't tell me, oh, if you have kids, you're gonna buy the Camaro. No, because the back seat's useless. It is useless. And if you really wanted a car with a back seat that was fast in a straight line, you'd buy a Challenger. That's just it too. Is that the Challenger is the silent killer in all of this, okay? What I mean by that is the Challenger just kind of hangs in the back. It hasn't had a refresh in a long time, but Mopar, Dodge, keeps doing crazy things with the Challenger. They keep putting all these big motors in it. They made the Hellcat, they made the Demon. And look, they didn't even have to change the body. So why can't Camaro just be like, oh, well, you know, we're just going to keep our hella badass cool body and just keep spicing up, because that's what Dodge is doing. Dodge, basically, they haven't had a refresh on the Challenger, I think, since it came out. Like, taillights and stupid little things like that, but nothing major, you know, nothing big. So, I don't know. Leave a comment down below if you've ever owned a Mustang or a Camaro, and give me your thoughts on what you think is going to happen. Do you think the Camaro is going to come back? Do you? Do you think that it's going to go away and they're just going to focus purely on the C8 Corvette? Let me know. Like and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a wonderful day. Peace.